Hey, and welcome to the special live stream of 1 Minute Podcast Tips, I guess, or be a better podcaster. This is to celebrate the 100th episode of 1 Minute Podcast Tips, which is sorry, I've just got a live stream. Sorry about that. I had some volume going over on the other monitor there. Got a second monitor there just for some questions that were sent in previous to the live stream. So I'll be looking over there now and again. But as mentioned, this is like a special live stream. I've never really done a live stream before, at least on my own. Done it with Captivate, who I'm the head of podcaster support and experience at. And I've done some others with, being a guest on live streams, but I've not actually done one myself. So this is kind of new for me. So please bear with me, have some patience. I might make some little mistakes here and there. But it's really a celebration of 100 episodes of 1 Minute Podcast Tips. And just to say, thank you for, making a show one that a lot of podcasters listen to, which is awesome. And really to, answer any questions you have for a bit of fun on a Saturday afternoon. So as you can see at the bottom, I'll do a bit of housekeeping and then we'll go into the actual live stream proper if you like. But as you'll see at the bottom of the screen there, if you do have a question, just drop in the comments with question or even Q, but question at the front. And I'll look to pick that up as the live stream goes on. I do have some questions that were also sent in prior to that. So we'll be looking to that as well. But I'd love to hear your questions and answer them live, along with this live stream. We'll probably run this about, 30, maybe 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. We'll see how it goes. It's just like, this is off the cuff. Like I say, I just wanted to have a bit of fun on a Saturday afternoon. And I love talking podcasting anyway. So it'd be nice to just chat with fellow podcasters and answer any questions you have. So just looking to see, we've got Dan from the Delivery Doctor, who's in the comments there. So welcome, Dan. Good to have you here, mate. And I saw you pop some questions in there as well. So I'll be looking out for them, as they come through. But yeah, like I say, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So just if you're on the live stream now, just let me know in the comments, where you're from, what your show's about, etc. And we'll have a look at that for you. Now, I do want to see, just having a look at some of the customization. Like I say, I've never done the live stream solo before, and this is the first time I'm doing it using Boomcaster, which is the software I use. And I'm trying to see if there's like, if I can see the comments here, they pop up, or I need to look over to the actual stream there. It may be the stream, so I'm just trying to see that at the moment. But anyway, so like I say, if you've got any questions, drop them in the stream. Sorry, I'm the stream. Drop them in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or, YouTube, right here on YouTube, etc. And we'll pick them up for you. So yeah, like I say, let me know where you're about, where you're hanging out, what your show's about, etc. I'd love to know more about you as we go through this. And just bringing that up there. So I'm just going to close my little windows down here, and like I say, we'll wait for anybody else that wants to jump in, and then we'll go through some of the questions and go through that. So I'm just going to pop down there and close my screen from that side and customize. There we go. So close down. Perfect. Okay, awesome. So like I said, we'll give it to about 1:05 and then we'll jump into the stream itself. And speaking of streams, I've just come from one earlier this morning, this afternoon. Dave Jackson, who's awesome. He does the School of Podcasting, and he always has a live stream every Saturday with his other co-host, I guess, of the live stream, Jim Collison from Average Guy TV. And that's always one I recommend checking out if you like to, follow live streams regularly and get answers to podcast questions and just generally hang out with a really cool community. The School of Podcasting one with Dave and Jim every Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, which is, I guess, kind of early for the Pacific time zone, folks. That's what, 7:30 in the morning, which is kind of early. But yeah, definitely an awesome live stream worth watching. So again, like I mentioned, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll probably get started fairly soon. And this will be, it'll be left for replay afterwards. If you can't make the live stream and you want to watch it afterwards, I'll be sending an update out with the newsletter. And I'll probably be either using this as a bonus episode of the audio version of 1 Minute Podcast Tips, as well as uploading this to the YouTube channel or leaving it on YouTube, or break down, some of the questions into individual episodes. So that's another way to catch up, with any questions that you may have missed. Now, if I don't have the answer to any of the questions that are asked or any that pop up, whether that's in the comments or in the questions that got sent in earlier, I will ask someone that knows more than I do. because obviously, I'm an audio person, but I do some video. So if it's a video specific question and it's something I don't know, I will find that out for you and I'll come back with that answer and either drop it in the comments or reach out through your YouTube channel or whatever you are, whatever your preference is for the question, if it came in via email, for example. So we'll get on with the podcast. We'll get on with the stream now and we'll jump in with some questions. So I'm going to just look over here a quick second at some of the questions that popped in prior to the stream. I'd put a notice out last week just saying we're going to be doing this. If you have any questions, send them in either via SpeakPipe or email or via the 1 Minute Podcast Tips contact area. So I've got some really good questions here actually that I'll be going through. There's a couple that are like, I haven't spoken about some of these for a while actually, so it'll be fun to revisit them, so to speak. And as I mentioned, if you've got any questions of your own, I'd love to hear them. So drop them in the comments there. I know Dan at the Delivery Doctors already dropped them in on the live chat there. So I'll be looking for them coming through as well. But let's have a look at this first question. It came in from over at Reddit, actually. I'm really active at Reddit. So if you're over there, there's some amazing podcasting subreddits. So there's podcasting, there's podcast, there's podcasters, and then you've got voiceover and audio and all that cool stuff and video podcasting. And then you have some for brands like Shure, Rode, all that cool stuff. So Reddit's an awesome place if you want to hang out and get some really good tips and advice or ask questions that you're curious about. Highly recommend it. But this one came in from Reddit from Metaban. Interesting name, Metaban. Is that ban and meta full stop or just Metaban? But I love that. So from Metaban, should you script your episodes? So with podcasting, I tend to not script them. The podcasts I have though are probably not really set out for scripting. So obviously you've got 1 minute podcast tips. So as the name suggests, each episode is a 1 minute tip. So it doesn't really need scripting. I look for questions from the community or pain points that I see online, or even, questions that came back from previous episodes. So I don't really script them. I just answer questions that have arisen in the community. For the In and Around podcasting show that I co-host with my colleague, Mark Asquith, who's the co-founder and CEO over at Captivate, we have this industry show called In and Around Podcasting. We don't really script it out. We will have some bullet points and talking points, but we really enjoy the sort of organic flow when we bring guests on. So we'll always bring guest co-hosts on each episode from the industry, and we'll have questions and topics that we want to discuss with them, but we won't have it scripted out as such. And then for my 5 Random Questions podcast, again, it's not scripted as such because, as the name suggests, it's me asking my guests 5 random questions that are generated by a random question generator. So I may have a couple of bullet points how to open the episode, maybe a question or so that I want to talk to the guest about before we go into the episode proper. But apart from that, I don't script it. I will have, as I mentioned, we'll have like talking points and bullet points. But there are sometimes, also there's podcasting niches and categories that it does make sense to script it out. And if you feel more comfortable scripting it out, then obviously, go for that. If you don't feel comfortable winging it or ad-libbing or going with the flow, by all means, script it out. So have your start, middle, and the takeaways in between, the calls to action you want to offer, etc. But what I would recommend with the scripting point of view is sometimes, especially on interview podcasts, for example, if you've got a script of, say, here are the 10 questions I want to ask my guest on this episode, if the guest answers with something different and goes off on a tangent, unless you're ready to go off on that tangent as well, then it can disjoint the episode when your guest has said something and you go straight back to question 7, for example. That has nothing to do with what your guest just talked about. So just be wary if you are scripting or if you have bullet points ready for your episode, that if your guest does go off somewhere, be ready to go with that and keep it organic. And then you can always pull it back to the question or even drop that question if it doesn't make sense to continue with the episode and go to the next one or follow up with a question based on what your guest said. So as I mentioned, it's really down to if the podcast is right for a script and your comfort factor. You should always be comfortable when you're making a podcast. So if a script makes that more comfortable for you, all means go for that. We got the Wild West Extravaganza popped in as well. That's an awesome channel there. I'm going to check that out. I love that name. And thanks for that. Thanks for everything you do, Danny. Can you go over your editing? And I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words there. can you go over your editing process, preferred DAW, which is a digital audio workstation or editing software, and plugins or plugins? So great question. And Dan, I'll see, I saw your questions earlier. I don't know if you want to make them individual questions, mate, or if you want me just to go through these. I'll definitely go through them for you. But that's a great question. So my editing process now is a bit different from what it used to be. So previously, my editing process was I'd edit in Audacity or GarageBand when I moved to Mac, and then just download a file and upload that straight out. No sort of process and nothing like that. And that was fine. But as I spent more time podcasting and getting to know, why certain things should be edited. So if someone suffers from mesoneuma, I think that's the right name, the medical term, that's where if they hear eating noises or smacking lips or something like that, where you have these little mouth noises, that can really impact them from a health point of view. It can make them anxious, it can make them angry, it can make them really emotional. So you can use a plugin to remove stuff like that really easily. So it's worthwhile, editing what you can to make the listener experience better for your listeners. But for my process, my editing process, I'm pretty much a Hindenburg Pro guy. I stayed away from Hindenburg Pro for the longest time. I just couldn't get into the way it worked. But that was more me than the software. I eventually sat down and really got to grips with it, and I love it. It's a really cool, it's a premium piece of editing software. You can either buy a perpetual license, an annual license, or a monthly license, entirely up to you. But they do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So when you upload your audio file, they'll auto level it, they'll add noise reduction and some cool processing effects like that, balance out the volume, etc. They support VST plugins. So if you use Isotope, the RX suite, for example, or I use Acusonus, which is no longer around, the Era Bundle 6, love it. It's very much like Isotope's RX series or RX suite of plugins. I just feel some of the processing on Acusonus isn't quite as aggressive as Isotope, but again, that's user settings, so no disrespect or no shade on Isotope. They're great plugins. So I use Hindenburg Pro with Acusonus, and the plugins that I generally use, depending on my recording environment. If I'm in my own place, I don't really need to use the D-Room, which is a sort of reverb echo remover kind of thing. But if I'm going on site somewhere and it's lots of bare walls or a big room, etc., I will use that. But generally, the plugins I use is I may use D-Room. I tend to maybe use, what's the one I use? De-esser. I do have, I use the Rodecaster Pro 2, so a lot of that process is done prior to me recording. But sometimes, again, depending on the environment, I might hear a bit of sibilance coming through. So the de-esser maybe, and then I also use, now and again, I will use the EQ. So I've got some EQ settings on there. Again, like I mentioned, I use the Rodecaster Pro 2, so a lot of the EQ and etc. is already done for me prior to recording and editing. But if I find it, for whatever reason, there's something happened with the recording or something wasn't quite right with the environment, that will be my plugin. So yeah, so I'll record and edit locally on Hindenburg Pro using the plugins I mentioned, Acusonus. But if you've got Isotope, use the RX Suite. There's some great plugins out there. I'll export that, upload that to Captivate, ready for publishing. If I'm doing remote recording, I'll use Boomcaster, which is what I'm using now for this live stream. So Boomcaster is very similar to Squadcast, Riverside, etc. Got all similar features, so you can do remote recording. It's got local audio, 4K video files, live streaming like this, etc. But there's some cool features that I don't think, or I've not seen on other platforms. So you can have live closed captions. You can have lossless audio FLAC when you video. So if you do video podcasts, you don't necessarily have to process the audio afterwards. It's already processed for you on Boomcaster. So basically, that's my editing process. And for transcripts, I now use Captivate Spark AI. Previously, I was using WhisperScript, which is a desktop transcription app for Mac. But since Captivate released Spark AI last month, that includes transcription. So I use that for the transcript service. So I hope that answers that. Great question, though. So Dan, yeah, you can do individual questions. Okay, awesome. So hey, Martin Lingsberg's in the Lindeskog. So did I say Lindsberg? I apologize, Martin. Please accept my apologies. Hi, Martin. Good to see you, mate. Okay, Dan, so I'm going to look at this question now for you. So I'm 2 hours south of you and I live in the boonies. Well, I'm kind of in the boonies up here in Port Sydney, and we just recently got fibre at our home address. So that was a big plus, but I know what you mean. We're about in the boonies though. A driver and a 9 iron away from real high speed, or high speed. Okay, so I rely on a cell tower providing me with 50. I guess that's 50 uploads, 10 downloads, the other way around. Enough for co-hosting. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing remote recording, I'm going to assume you're on about remote recording and remote hosting or co-hosting with a Boomcaster or a Squadcast, etc. The main, like 50 should be enough as long as you've not got, you're not streaming or anything like that. But 50 meg, if I'm looking at this correct, where you've got 50 download and 10 upload, that should be enough. That I can't remember the stat, there's an exact stat somewhere that mentions what the good upload speeds are and download speeds are for, say, streaming, and what applications you can use based on these upload and download speeds. But prior to me, as I mentioned, we got fiber and not fiber. Oh yeah, fiber, I guess. We got that in last year, I think at the start of last year, just after the winter snow had disappeared. They came back in spring, finished all the work. That made a huge difference. But prior to that, even the internet service that it was on was kind of patchy and very similar to your speeds. I think maybe even 60/20. So not too dissimilar to your speeds, Dan. And I found that enough for the record. And the good thing with most remote recording platforms, or all of them, I think actually, they have local recording options. So even if your internet's a bit patchy and you get you get that sort of pixelated screen, etc., afterwards you've got the local version of that. So you've got the local audio files and the local video files. So you can download these and they will be perfect, basically. The only issue that I ever had with a low upload speed like that was a guest that was on I think it was like 1 megabit upload speed. It was really, really low. And that got stuck on the upload. So the Boomcaster team got in touch with them, walked them through how to resume, how to upload, how to optimize what their programs were running in the background, etc., to help with the speed. But I think, yeah, with the 5010, I think you should be okay. But I think in the FAQs, most of the platforms have an FAQ, and they'll tell you, here's the optimal settings or the optimal options for remote recording, and here's the minimum. I would mention that Riverside recently changed their specs, or their requirement specs. So you need to have, I think it's quad core processors, which I feel is a little bit overkill just for remote recording. So just double check with Riverside if you need certain upload and download speeds as well, because they may have tied that in because Riverside does a lot of AI stuff now as well on the back end with the processing. So that requires more hardware, obviously, and it might require more, upload and download speeds. But yeah, great question. Yeah, Martin, I agree. Boomcaster is a great tool. I think it was Raf. I can't remember Raf's surname, unfortunately. I've been using it for about 2 years now, and it was a podcaster called Raf, who's over in the US. It was in a Facebook group, and at the time, I was having some issues with my previous software, and Raf mentioned about Boomcaster. At the time, they were in beta, so it was very much like a different experience from what it is now. They added a lot of features in the last 6 to 12 months. It's really upped the performance and made a great UI, etc. But yeah, I love Boomcaster, and like I said, this is the first time I've done live streaming, but it seems fine. I'm enjoying it. The one thing I can't see is little comments coming in, which I like on StreamYard. We can see comments coming into the dashboard. I can't see that at the moment, but I haven't really played about with the live stream on Boomcaster, so it may be a setting that I'm not actually got switched on, which is why I'm looking over to see the live chat, etc. But I think, Martin, you had a question. Yeah, there we go. So do you have tips for audiogram tools? I will have questions regarding chapters. Okay, cool. But yeah, for audiogram. So audiograms are weird. Obviously, they're great if you do them and you have them as extra promotional tools for your episodes and for your podcast. But I do find that unless you do them properly, they can sometimes not have the effect or the results that you want. I know I've used audiograms in the past, and I've used like tracking codes in the sharing links to see how many listeners and downloads that I might have gotten from the audiogram. And I didn't always get a lot of click-throughs from the audiograms. I got more click-throughs from just maybe a graphic and some blurb underneath it, and then the link and sharing that. That's not to say audiograms don't work. So from a tool set, I mean, obviously Descript does that now as part of their software. I think Riverside has a feature where you can create like snippets and social snippets with the overlaid text, etc. And you can choose what the layout looks like. There's a great tool that I used to use called reel.so. So that's reel.so. They've rebranded. It got bought by someone. I can't remember what the name's called, but if you go to reel.so, it will automatically redirect to the new, domain and the new brand, the new company, etc. There's also Video, so that's vid.yo. Gotta love tech names, right? But Video, I checked it out a couple of months back, and they're really good. So basically, they're not so much audiograms, though. They're more based on for YouTube. So if you do video podcasting, you drop your YouTube URL into Video, and they will then scour that and try pick out the best 5, 6, 7 clips for your audience based on the video. And they'll have a little ranking system next to each clip that says 92, 86, 71, etc. And basically what that is that's the optimum percentage of how, not viral, that's not correct, but how what the likelihood is of this being really well received and being viewed and etc. So that's Video. So that would be some of the ones that I look at. I would, as I mentioned, I would suggest that use tracking codes when you're sharing the links. So whether that's a Google URL builder, if you're using attribution links on Captivate, if you're using, I believe YouTube now lets you do little short codes, etc. But just so you can track exactly how successful that was to push it back to where you're sending the links to. So another one from Dan over at the Delivery Doctor. I've tested Boomcaster, love the support Hardy provides. I've also tested Squadcast, but it's stagnated since being bought out. So Boomcast will be my choice. Does it link with Captivate? Good question. So at the moment, no, and I'm not saying that it may. I know we have some integrations at Captivate, and we're always looking for options, to pull into Captivate that offers extra feature sets to our podcasts on top of the tools that Captivate offers. So we do Descript, for example. We do Squadcast. We do Aweber and MailChimp for email marketing. We do Zapier for automation. So we're always looking at some integrations. This year we've sort of stepped back from integrations a little bit because we've been working on some of our own features. So the Spark AI, for example, the chapters and podcasting 2.0 additional support. But I know, we've had requests to maybe look to integration with other tools. So maybe a Riverside or a Boomcaster, etc. So never say never. As a user, I'd love to have it integrated, but that's me. I'm biased because I use Boomcaster, and obviously I use Captivate because I work there. So yeah, never say never. It may be. I'd love to see it. So who knows? Fingers crossed. So yeah, so that was an awesome question. So I'm going to go back to a couple of questions that came in from the pre stream, if you like. So this is a good one from Phoebe. Is it Phoebe? Yeah, Phoebe Aubrey, who came in from Facebook, if I recall. So Phoebe's asking, do you think paid ads are worth it? And I will say yes with a caveat or a caveat or two. So obviously, if you have a budget and you're looking to grow your podcast beyond, say, organic promotion and referrals from listeners and recommendations, then paid advertising can definitely work. But it needs to be effective and it needs to be right for the audience that you're going after. So a lot of people talk about, let's pay, when it comes to paid advertising, you've got Google ads, you have Facebook ads, Instagram ads, etc. All good. But what I tend to find with podcasting, at least audio podcasting especially, maybe not so much video podcasting, but certainly with audio podcasting, it's very hard to get clicks through from social media to turn them into listeners. Now, it may just be me, but I tend to find most of my referrals come from other listeners recommending the show, for example, reviews online, that kind of stuff, and linking back to the website, the Captivate site. I don't get a lot of traffic from social, and that's fine because that's not really, I see social as more a community building and awareness play as opposed to driving traffic to a podcast, for example. So when it comes to paid advertising, I always recommend going for industry stuff. So podcast apps, for example, generally people listen to podcasts on podcast apps, whether that's Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Pocket Cast, etc. So it makes sense if that podcast app offers advertising options, advertising the app. It makes it a lot easier just to see our recommended podcast and click follow or click play trailer or whatever the advertising play is on that. Excuse me. Because they're already on the app, makes it super easy for them just to press play or press follow. Same with industry publications, other newsletters in your niche. So, for example, the show 1 Minute Podcast Tips, it's all about podcasting. So I could advertise on Pod News, for example, or I could advertise on Earbuds Collective, which is Ariel Nissenblatt's, newsletter. Then maybe I could advertise on Lauren Passo's Think Media, all that kind of stuff. So look at opportunities where it makes sense to really advertise where your audience really are and where there's not so many hoops for them to jump through. Because if I'm advertising on Twitter or Facebook, etc., yep, they've got some great targeting tools and I can target that audience, but then they've got to physically click that link and then jump through. And let's say my landing page, my podcast landing page isn't mobile optimized. Then if I'm coming from Twitter or Facebook, but I'm maybe on my mobile phone and it's not a mobile optimized landing page from the ad, that's going to cause another disconnect. Then you've got to choose, okay, what do I do now? I've landed here. Do I click subscribe or do I click through to a podcast app, etc.? So remove the hoops and look at where it makes sense for your audience. And like I say, for podcasts especially, podcasting apps, newsletters, industry publications, all that kind of stuff, that's where it really makes sense to, put your advertising money, I feel. But yeah, great question, Phoebe. Thank you. Let's have a look. We're back over here. So, hey, Dan. So let's have a look. Is Captivate office hours on Thursdays? Yes, they are. I'm still running. I haven't signed up for Captivate yet, but I'm now my second time through Podcast Launch Accelerator and eager to get started podding. So yeah, so over on Facebook, Captivate has 2 Facebook groups. We've got a Facebook group just for Captivate podcasters, but we also have one called Launch, the Podcast Launch Accelerator group. And that's open to anybody. Doesn't matter what host you're with, just come in there. It's a great collection of podcasters and sharing tips, advice, asking questions, all the normal cool stuff that you would have in a community, like an online podcasting community. But every Thursday, we have the office hours. And that used to be like a live stream like this, just for 30 minutes or 1 hour though. And it could be difficult because people were in different time zones and maybe not be able to catch the live stream or the replay afterwards. So what we do now is we have a 4-hour open comments option in the Podcast Launch Accelerator Facebook group, where I will just open up the questions. Hey, it's Thursday, it's 10 o'clock. We're live for the next 4 hours in the group. Come ask us any questions. So if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments after that post, and one of the team, whether it's myself, Ben, Mark, whoever, will be there to answer that question. So it's really fun, simple way to answer, ask your podcast questions, and it's got a 4-hour window. So generally that covers a lot of different time zones. And the cool thing is you can obviously come back at any time and just drop a question back in there. So yeah, it's still there for sure. So we've got another question from Martin. Yeah, so how could I use Captivate's Amy if I don't have regular advertising spots? Could I record a call to action short message and use that? Exactly. So Amy is Captivate's dynamic insertion tool. So basically, dynamic insertion, if you've never used it before, as the name suggests, it's dynamic content you can insert into your episodes that you can change up at any time and keep your podcast really relevant. And you can have it as a pre-roll, which is before your episode audio begins. You can have it as a mid-roll, which is anywhere inside the episode itself, or you can have it as a post-roll, which is when the episode audio ends. So most people use dynamic content for advertiser messages or sponsor messages, etc. But the cool thing is with dynamic content is you can use it for anything. So while you can use it for sponsor messages or advertisers, you can use it to promote other podcasts you have. You can use it to promote a live event like this, for example, that you have. You can use it to do trailer swaps with other podcasters in your niche, and you want to do cross-feed promo, trailer swaps or promo drops. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can use dynamic content. It doesn't just have to be for for sponsor messages and advertisers. And then the cool thing is, because it's dynamic, you can change it up at any time. So Martin, if you did get a sponsor that you want to add in and you currently have your own message in there, you could either add the sponsor message alongside your own message or just replace them. So swap out your message, put the sponsor one in, and run that for, say, however long you want. A month, then you've got a new sponsor or a new adder. They're only sponsoring your show for a month or a season or something. So at the end of that, again, you can either just remove that altogether or replace it with your own message or another trailer swap, etc. So yeah, use it for whatever you want. It's not always just sponsor messages and ads. And one of the best ways to grow your podcast is promote your own show as an ad, like an internal ad almost within your podcast. So if you've got 2 or 3 different podcasts, and let's say 2 of them have got a similar niche, so maybe you have a movie podcast, and then you've got a second, like a complementary podcast to that talks about the behind the scenes stuff. So direction, special effects, you talk to the people behind the movies. So you could always drop a dynamic ad in or a dynamic message in the main podcast, say, hey, if you enjoy this show, I'd love for you to check out podcast B, which goes behind the scenes of the movies that we're talking about. And you'll get to hear from people like X, Y, Z, etc. And it's a really cool way to really promote your own content using dynamic insertion. And like I say, because it's dynamic, you can update it at any time. So if you did a movie show, sticking with the movie shows, for example, and you did a review of The Crow, the original Crow with Brandon Lee, and that episode came out a year ago. So let's say the new Crow came out and you want to update, your review of that new Crow and bring the listeners of your previous episode, or vice versa. You want your new listeners of the new movie to go check out the previous review of the original movie. Put a bit of dynamic content in there. Say, hey, I love you. We did the original movie back in episode 126. Here you can go to this link and check out. I'd love to hear what you think of that one. So there's a lot of cool ways you can really mess about with dynamic content. A, to keep your podcast relevant and up to date, but B, just to cross promote and grow your show within. So here's another question from Dan, and then we'll take another look at one of the ones that came in prior. So we got that. Hey, Harry, speak of the devil. Harry's just dropped into the comments on. So Harry's the founder of Boomcaster that I'm using here. He's just dropped in and says, congrats on your 100th episode. Thank you so much. I've got some questions about the live stream. I'll ask them afterwards, but enjoying it so far. It seems very easy, mate. So great job. So Dan, yeah. So question: most of my episodes will be interviews for one podcast, most online, but some will be in the studio. What do you suggest for type of mic that would work for 2 people? Do we both need headphones? So I always recommend using headphones. I think they're one of the most important pieces of equipment that you can have. And I think I did an episode about this actually on 1 Minute Podcast Tips a few weeks back about headphones, because they really do allow you to catch little nuances and pick up stuff you might have missed had you not been using headphones, or maybe if you're using monitors and they didn't quite pick that up. So I always recommend headphones, and they also help avoid echo. If you've got, for example, one podcaster using headphones, especially on remote recording, and one podcaster not using headphones, you will get that echo in there. Now, there are tools that you can use. I know Boomcaster has echo cancellation for that example, and some other remote tools probably have that too. I think Squadcast did when I used to use them. So you can get around that. But for a 2-person, if you're in the same room, I would strongly suggest dynamic mics, because unless you get a good condenser mic that's got omnidirectional, and you're both speaking into that. So at the moment, this one I'm using, this is a condenser, but it's a cardioid. So the pattern is only picking up what's in front of it. So if someone was sat behind me, let's say this was a 2-person podcast, and someone was sat over here, this is my hand, this is a person. If they were speaking into it, you wouldn't get the clarity that you get, and hopefully at the moment, because it's a cardioid condenser mic. But if you were like sitting close together and you may get away with just using a cardioid, but if you had like an omnidirectional, or I can't remember what the other, like the stereo cardioid, I'm not sure what that is, so I apologize for that. My mind got a little bit there with the name, but you may get away with using a condenser if you've got 2 people close together in a room. If you wanted that sort of comfort on video kind of look, where you've got 2 people on a comfy chair, they've got a desk in between the 2 mics, dynamic for sure, because the dynamics are a bit more forgiving when it comes to the noise that they pick up in the room environment. But noise rejection, or off-axis noise rejection, so at the back of the mic, is usually a little bit better on dynamic mics because of how they work. So if you got two dynamic mics and you had the back of the mic pointing at the person opposite you, that helps with the noise reduction and not picking up the other person's voice. And you can mess about with some of the gain levels on whatever interface you're using, etc. So yeah, and you can pick up dynamic mics fairly inexpensively now. It depends on your budget, obviously. And what you want to look for, does it need to look good on camera if you do video, or are you more about the audio? So if it's more about the audio, the ATR 2100X from Audio Technica is an amazing mic. And it's like $50 on sale normally. So you can pick it up fairly inexpensively. You can pick up the Rode Pod mic for $100. They're pretty good mics as well. So yeah, really depends on your environment. If you've got, a nicely treated room, or, you've got some treatment in your room with softening walls and hardwood floors, etc., condenser mics can offer a bit more clarity, but they can be less forgiving for what they pick up and harder for two people to work around, depending on, the pattern of the mic and where you speak into. So I hope that makes sense. So you've got the MV7 that you use, but also an older Sennheiser that might work. But yeah, so both of these mics will work. The Sennheiser are good mics. MV7's an awesome mic, both through a version 1 Rodecaster. So there you go, your setup. They would work. What I would do, Dan, is look at the distance and just sort of experiment with that. So you can, and like I say, have the headphones on, because you will hear then if you're picking up mic bleed, which is obviously when you're hearing another person coming through your headphones. Because if you can hear it, then your listeners or your viewers can also hear that. So yeah, experiment with that, mate, and just see what works best. But like I say, you want the two ends pointing at each other, or pointing at the other speaker, I should say, and that will also help reduce the effect of someone else opposite you not picking up their voice. Hope that makes sense anyway. So let's have a look. But really good question, and good luck with that. And I mentioned that good luck with the podcast when you get podded, not good luck, you're going to need it. That came across wrong. I apologize if that's how it came over. So who we got there? Oh, this is a good one, actually. Very topical. So Mark Duval, this came in via SpeakPipe, actually. So thanks for that, Mark. And I sent you back a recording as well, just in case you can't, view this. But yeah, Mark's got a really good question. So what should I use now that Chartable is closing? So Chartable, if you used it, you know what it is. If you didn't use it, basically Chartable was a third-party tracking prefix that you would add to your podcast RSS feed, and it kind of ties in to Spotify. It used to be Apple, but it didn't. It stopped with some of the connection to Apple because Apple closed off that access. But basically, it would give you some more information around your podcast audience. So maybe some demographics, maybe some listen time on Spotify, etc., where your show charted in the US, Canada, etc. So it was a really cool tool that gave you some more information around your podcast. Unfortunately, it's closing down in December. I think it's December 12th when it closes. So Spotify acquired Chartable along with some others like Podsites and some other tools back in 2021, 2022, I'm going to say. And they're now moving all that in-house. So Chartable's gone away, and they sent an email out saying if you have the Chartable prefix, remove it from your RSS feed by December X. Otherwise, it could stop your feed working, which is never good. So at Captivate, we updated our podcasters to make sure the feed's removed, or the prefix is removed. I know other hosts have done the same, etc. So yeah, so Chartable's gone away. So there's now been a lot of talk. I see a lot of posts on Reddit. I've seen some support tickets coming to Captivate, etc., about what happens now. So if you still want to access, say, your chart position, or you want to get some more analytics that maybe your current host doesn't quite give you, there are some options. So, for example, if it's a chart you want to do, if you still want to track where does my podcast show up on Apple charts, or on, who else does it? There's a few places that does charts. Goodpods, for example. You can use something like, so there's, I'm just got some details here. So there's one called Pod Status. There's also Podkite and Podgagement. So they've all got pods in them, easy to find. But yeah, Pod Status, Podkite, and Podgagement. They will all track your reviews and chart positions, etc., and send you an email, let you know how many reviews you've got, where that puts your podcast into the charts, etc. Podstate, I think they're all premium as well. I know Podgagement is, I think Podkite is, and Podstatus, I think that's something like $5 a month for up to 5 podcasts or something like that. So these ones are premium. You'd have to pay a bit extra, but they will give you that feature that Chartable had. When it comes to analytics, if you're looking for additional analytics over and above what your hosting company offers, there's PodTrack, which is a really cool tool, and they give you some more details about, listener drop-off and all that stuff. But there's also a free one called OP3, and that's op3.dev. And this is a free tool. It's another prefix that you would add to the front of your RSS feed, and your host can do that for you if they support tracking prefixes, or you can add it yourself if you've got the option to do that. If not, just ask your hosting company if they can add it for you. But this is by a guy called John Spurlock, a developer called John Spurlock, and it's a free tool, and it's really useful because it gives you some details about, it breaks down countries and then breaks down, by the regions and the most popular user agents and the most popular provinces and etc. And it's got a whole bunch of information there that you may not quite get at your current host. Like I know, for example, I use Spotify for Podcasters, the podcaster dashboard, as opposed to the hosting version, because they do call both of them the same thing, which can be a bit confusing. But when I go into the Spotify for Podcasters dashboard to get some more audience data on my listeners, that one is just for Spotify. So OP3 gives me, some more details on that I can then combine with all the awesome analytics Captivate gives and get a fuller picture. So OP3 is really cool. And then for smart links, so Chartable used to have a smart link feature, which was a neat feature where you could create a smart link, share that link, and then if someone was on iOS, it would open up Apple. If they were on Android, when Google Podcasts were still here, it was open up Google Podcasts. Or you could choose to open it in Spotify, etc., and add links to your podcast show or episode to that smart link, and people could then open the link, choose what app to use. So since that's gone away, there are a few options there. So you've got Linkfire, you got Plink, which is an interesting name, and episodes.fm, which is a new one from Nathan. I'm going to say it's Nathan, not Wainwright. I can't remember Nathan's surname now. I apologize, Nathan. But he did, was it Podfollow or Podlink? I think it was Podlink, actually. So he's got episodes.fm, and that's a really cool one where you just search for your podcast name, and it'll show you all the apps that you're published on. You can click an episodes tab, and it'll show all the episodes that are published. And then you just click, copy the link for that and share that. Then when somebody comes through and opens that link, it will display all these podcast apps. The moment they click that, their preferred app, that's the one that they will always be sent to. So if you then share a new link from episodes.fm and that same person clicks on the link, it will automatically open up Spotify again for them because that was their choice the last time. So it's a really cool little feature there. And if you use Captivate, we obviously have our single promo link where you can use, you can create a landing page and choose what apps to display on that, send people to that, and then they can choose what app to listen on. So that was a good one. I like that one. So yeah, Martin, there you go. The Open Podcast Prefix Project, OP3, that's a lot of P's there, not recommended for podcasters and plosives. But yeah, the OP3 project is an open source podcast prefix analytics service committed to open data and listener privacy. So it's awesome. It's a really good one, and I would recommend it. I mean, I've got, like Captivate, we have awesome analytics anyway, but I also use the OP3 one because it's a nice way also. What I like about the OP3 one, and Martin mentioned it, that it's got open data and, it's got great privacy, but it's got open data. It's a really great way to be transparent about your audience. There's no shame if you've got like low, I'm going to do air quotes here, low download numbers, because it's not all about that. It's about your engagement and what listeners are doing regarding your podcast. So OP3 is a great way to be transparent with, say, sponsors and advertisers. Say, hey, here's my listener data here, but you can see here, and this is a great thing that OP3 does as well, is they will look at podcasts and apps that supply this data, and it will show you the percentage of the episode that was listened to by listeners. So you'll have a graph underneath the original result on OP3. It'll show this podcast episode or this podcast is listened to 75% of the way through, or 100% of the way through, or 90% of the way through by listeners based on these apps. And then it'll be apps like Fountain, Podcast Addict, etc., that sort of share that data back with OP3. So again, it's a really cool way to see a listener drop-off that you might not get with your podcast hosting company, or you don't access Podcast Connect for Apple or Spotify for podcasters that can give you that listener drop-off data. So OP3 is a really good good option. So yeah, Dan, the furnace just came on and oops the sound. And again, and some mics have better noise rejection than other mics. So I would, if you can, I would recommend, if you were looking for a new mic, for example, trying to get in and look at reviews for background noise rejection. There's a great review channel, podcastage from Brandrew Scott, not Scott. And he does a lot of hardware and mic especially reviews. And what I like about Brandrew is he does a lot of mic comparisons. So you'll say, okay, I'm reviewing this mic, but I've got these 10 other mics at different varying price points, and this is how this mic compares. And he'll do stuff like noise rejection, background noise rejection, if there's any resonance, if you accidentally bump the table or your mic stand or anything like that. So I highly recommend checking out Brandrew Scott podcastage on YouTube. But yeah, if you've got a furnace that kicks in, my wife's mum's got a furnace, and that's really, really loud when that kicks in. So I can only imagine if you've got a loud furnace and you're doing a podcast recording that starts, it's like, ooh, there you go. So yeah, there's some mics that have got better off-access rejection than other mics. So check these ones out for sure. All right, so let's have a look. I got a couple of more questions here. So we got, this is a good one actually. I like this one that came in from, well, we say this a lot anyway. I'm going to ask this question. So again, it's from Reddit, Phoenix_27. What's the best way to monetize and how soon can I start? So this is a question that we tend to see quite a bit. Say at Captivate when we get new podcasters that are just starting, or I'm online at Reddit and you see questions like this, and you're at podcasting events with podcast, panels, etc., about monetization, and there's nothing wrong with that. You put a lot of love and effort, sweat, blood, and tears into creating a podcast, so it makes sense that you want to try monetize it and at the very least cover these costs, and then after that it's all bonus. So the best way to monetize, if you're just starting out, advertising is not for you. Advertising works off the CPM model. So CPM is cost per milli or cost per thousand. And that's how much advertiser will pay you per 1,000 downloads. At the moment, let's say the average CPM is $20. I think it's a little bit more actually. But let's say it's easy math for me. So it's $20 CPM. So that means for every 1,000 downloads you will get $20. If you've got 5,000, you'll get $100. But generally CPM, advertisers look for these downloads in the first 7 days or the first 28 days per episode. It's not always combined over your whole show, it's per episode. So when someone says $20 per CPM, $20 CPM, sorry, and they're talking about 1,000 downloads, they want 1,000 downloads per episode each month, as opposed to 1,000 downloads overall for all your episodes over that 1 month period. So that's where it can be a bit different. And obviously, if you're starting, you're not going to have 1,000 downloads per month. And even regular podcasters don't have 1,000 downloads per month. It's hard to grow a show that way and get to that stage. So I would as a new podcaster, ignore the advertising route and look more to other options. And there's a whole bunch of options. So you've got, Martin was on about sponsorships earlier. So you have sponsors. If you've got a podcast that's niche to a local area, you can do hyperlocal sponsorship. We've got a great podcaster at Captivate. He's over in Florida, and all the podcasts are very much about the area of Florida that he lives in and the businesses there, etc. So he does great sponsorships with local businesses because his audience is going to be in that area anyway, and he can see that from his analytics. The sponsors that he works with are also in that area. So he can actually say to sponsors, I can send you foot traffic to your store or your online store, etc., each week or each month, or whatever that looks like for your sponsorship. So that's a great option. Even when you're first getting started, if you can say, hey, I've got a newsletter and I can tell by my analytics that I've got 100 engaged subscribers who've also shown interest in me starting a podcast version of the newsletter. If you've got like 100 people that are engaged and ready to listen to your calls to action and work with recommended sponsors by you because they trust you, then that's a great starting point, even before your show gets off the ground. But again, from a sponsor point of view, if you can show, going back to the downloads, like downloads are an important metric because you can't have a listen without a download. But you can have a download without a listen because of auto downloads, etc. So don't always look at the downloads as your key metric. Look at listeners, engaged listeners, unique listeners, listen through time, drop off time. Are they clicking through on your calls to action, etc. And if you can show a sponsor that, here's an example. Let's say I'm a podcaster that's got 1,000 downloads per month, but I only have 100 engaged listeners. That's not bad. That's 10%, which isn't a bad percentage. So you might think that's a good opportunity for a sponsor. But if I'm a podcaster that's got only 500 downloads per month, but still keep the 100 listeners, that now doubles the percentage. I've now got 20% of my listenership that's actually engaged with my podcast. So that's twice as many engaged listeners via the previous stat, and so on. If you had same 1,000 downloads, but now we've got 500 engaged listeners, that's 50% of the audience. So again, stay away from the downloads as a pure metric. Look at what your actual audience is doing, because that is more attractive to a potential sponsor than just an empty download. So you've got sponsorships, you have memberships and tips. So Patreon, Captivate has our memberships. We have our tips as well, which is kind of similar to Buy Me a Coffee, where listeners can say, throw you $1, $2, $5 as a donation, or they can sign up for premium content. So exclusive content, early access, maybe exclusive invites to live streams, for example. Maybe you do meetups or live recordings in cities, and people get, premium members get access to that. So that's where people pay you a monthly amount to get premium content. You also have value for value or streaming. So value for value, a lot of people confuse it with just streaming only. So streaming stats, sorry. So that's Bitcoin, where, if you use the Podcasting 2.0 app, you can support your favorite podcaster by sending them sats, which is Bitcoins, and say, thanks for, the content. I find value from it. But there's also the value as well. So, reviews, that's a value. If your listener gives you a review, that's them giving you value for the value you give as your podcast. So there's value for value. There's also, affiliates. Affiliate marketing can still be a pretty good option as long as the affiliate program and the products, etc., are really relevant to your audience. So if I do a show called 1 Minute Podcast Tips, and let's say I'm an affiliate for Boomcaster, for remote recording, for podcasting, I might be an affiliate for, I don't know, Aweber, for email marketing, that kind of stuff. So as long as you make it really relevant to your audience, there's that, that option. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to monetize. And how soon can you start? As I mentioned, if you're looking at advertising, you're going to have to wait until you build your audience up, unfortunately, and get these, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 downloads per month within that time frame of first 7 days, first 28 days, first 30 days, etc. But from sponsorship and partners and community, etc., you can start before you even launch, as long as you have a plan in place that shows you, why sponsors might want to work with you. So a great question, Phoenix27. I'd love to know your name, actually. And as I say, it's one that we see popping up quite a bit. All right, so let's pop back into the comments here. So is this a question? Yeah, I think it is. Okay, so Dan's got a question. Captivate covers many of the needs that smaller apps provide, like transcript, website, etc. And SparkAI might bring it closer to being an all-in-one service for someone. Add in Boomcaster, and I'm okay. So yeah, I mean, if you're doing, like I say, if you're doing remote recording, if you've got a co-hosted show, and you're like, for Mark and I, for example, on in and around podcasting, Mark's in the UK, I'm in Canada, so we can't physically record in the same space. So we'll use a remote recording platform. We'll then download the audio file for that. I'll do the editing, or Mark will do the editing, whoever's doing the editing that week, and we'll upload that to Captivate ready to push out, and then use the tools that you mentioned. If we do the video version, we'll obviously upload that to YouTube. So yeah, I mean, you can, Captivate's got a lot of features that you can use at the moment, Dan, and it really helps you on the production side. So dynamic show notes, for example, lets you create templates that load each episode, so you don't have to copy paste show notes over all the time, all that cool stuff. Yeah, guest booking, you can send an invite out to guests, and we'll manage that in Captivate and then pull that into your show notes. So there's a lot of features on Captivate that will help you, and Boomcaster would be separate, but as I mentioned, really easy just to download your files, edit, and get them ready to upload to either Captivate or your other hosting platform if you use another host, or YouTube if you use YouTube video podcasting. Ooh, Harry's got a question. All right, let's have a look at this. Danny, what's your take on podcasting 2.0? If you've already discussed this, please ignore it. I wasn't there in the beginning. I saw you weren't there in the beginning. Really disappointed with that. Using your tool, recommending it. You weren't even there. No, it's a really good question. And I think podcasting 2.0, Harry, is it's awesome. There's some features that might get used less than others, but the main goal of podcasting 2.0, for anyone that's not either A, familiar with it or not really using it to its full potential at the minute, as the name suggests, it's like a sequel to RSS. So RSS has always been the platform, the tool that's used by podcast apps to pull in your podcast and episodes, etc. And that's been around for years. It's been around on blogs. Blogs use RSS feed to send it out to subscribers. Same with podcasts. Podcasting 2.0 is the sort of natural progression of that. So with the original RSS feed, it's very static. You publish an episode, the RSS feed's picked up, and it's sent out to Apple, Spotify, etc. The listener listens to it on their app, and that's it, done and dusted. Podcasting 2.0 offers the options to add tags or features to your RSS feed to make it more interactive and a better listening experience for your listener. So some of them might be, for example, I mentioned value for value. You've got the funding tag, which allows you to put whatever link you use to support your show. So it may be Patreon, maybe PayPal, maybe Buy Me a Coffee, whatever that is. You can drop that link into the funding section of your podcasting host. And then anytime that someone listens on an app that supports funding, there'll be a little sort of $ or a support the show button or something like that on the podcast app. And that will take that listener through to your preferred payment, revenue, monetization platform. You have transcripts, which are perfect for making your show more accessible to the hard of hearing community, because that will be obviously a text version of the audio that can then be followed along with by the person with the hearing, with the hard of hearing issue, and they can follow the transcript along with the audio. A lot of podcast apps now allow you to follow the transcript along with the audio as it's been speaking. So that's awesome. You have other podcasting 2.4 features like chapters. Much like YouTube videos have chapters, that you can jump to certain parts of the video. Same with podcast audio. Now you can put chapters in there, and that allows you to jump to certain parts. Or if you want to jump back to a section you really enjoyed and want to share that directly with someone, go to the chapter, get the link for that, and send it off. So there's a lot of cool features with podcasting 2.0. You've got the live tag, which I don't think is being used as much as other of the podcasting 2.0 stuff. But live, again, if you have the opportunity to do a live recording of your podcast and you have the live tag enabled on your RSS feed, listeners can jump in as soon as you start hit record. And if you've got comments open, some podcast apps have comments option in there. You could have comments going, with the live recording. So podcasting 2.0 is really a really cool way to make your show a lot more interactive for the listeners, and it allows you to connect better with them and vice versa. And there's some great features that are being discussed at the moment to come up as future, podcasting 2.0 stuff. So yeah, highly recommend it if you're not using it at the moment. Even if you just use stuff like the funding or the transcript as well, make your show as accessible as possible, for the hard of hearing community. So there's some great features there. What else we got? Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. I might, so loving this live stream. Hope it's the first of many. Appreciate the advice. If you're 1 hour east of Toronto on the 401, drop in the beers on me. I'm about 3 hours, I think, maybe 2.5 actually, Toronto. But yeah, I'm always, I'm not down that way a lot, but there's some great craft brewers down that way. So that's an option. But yeah, I may do more of these. Like I said, this is more for the 100th episode. I'm not a video person, which you'll see if you look at my YouTube channel. I've got some videos there. I'm going to try and do some more for like tips and that, but I'm an audio person. I prefer audio, but this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. So we'll see. You've been a kind crowd. So Martin, I want to use chapters, but I have to find the workflow for it. I think Captivate will help me with this. So yeah, the cool thing with any hosting company, so Captivate does a few options for you. If you use a software tool like an editor that allows you to insert your chapter timestamp, so Hindenburg allows you to do that, for example, then when you download that MP3, include the chapters, and when you upload that to Captivate, we'll recognize that audio file's got chapters in it, and we'll insert that into your show notes, into your episode, so these are where the chapters are. Now, if you want to add chapter images or chapter links, etc., you've also got that option. We also have chapters inside Captivate itself. So if you don't use an editing tool that allows you to insert the chapter timestamps, you can still upload the MP3 file to Captivate into the episode. And when you're creating the episode, you've got the chapter option where you can insert chapters manually, using that. Or if you use Spark AI, we will actually create all the chapters for you and insert them, automatically for you. And the cool thing with Spark AI, if you're using the dynamic insert tool, Amy will recommend where to place the ad break or the sponsor message, etc., in your episode based on the episode file and the transcript and all that cool stuff. So it's a really neat workflow feature that makes it super easy for you to add chapters and do cool stuff with the dynamic content. So yeah. So I'm going to probably start wrapping up. I think I've covered all the questions that came in. Let me just see. I think I did the paid ad, so that's good. Here's a quick one, actually. Victoria, and this kind of ties in a little bit maybe for the first question, but Victoria Hamilton, should I use seasons for my show? And again, a lot of it depends on the podcast. I'm currently using seasons for my 5 random questions show. And the reason I use seasons is I like to take a break. When I've got a longer podcast, it takes a bit more time to put together. So it takes a bit more time to record, then edit afterwards and, process and all that stuff. So because of that, I like to take a break in between. So with that show, I took a 6-week break in between seasons. So season 1 finished mid-September, if I recall. And season 2, the new episode of season 2 will be dropping next Thursday. So October, 31st, Halloween. So I like to take seasons for breaks. Some podcast categories. So if you're doing like a serial, not the show, like a serial type of podcast. So it might be an audio fiction podcast, it might be a true crime podcast, something like that, where you're sort of telling a story. It can be worth taking seasons, much like your favorite TV show. You got Friends that had, however many seasons Friends had. You got Reacher, which is one of my favorite shows on Amazon Prime. That's got 2 seasons, about to start the 3rd, hopefully next year. And it's a nice way to sort of take stock, take a break, give your listeners a break as well, and get them excited for season 2, season 3, etc. So it really comes down to your preference. It's a great way to avoid pod fade as well, which is where you might get burned out because you're having to record all the time, then edit, then market, then research, and repeat, rinse and repeat. So it's a great way to avoid getting burnt out with all the stuff that goes on with creating a podcast. So it really, I tend to find seasons tend to work more with storytelling or narrative-led podcasts, as opposed to, I would never do seasons for 1-minute podcast tips, for example. Doesn't make sense. It's a simple show to make, and it's a really easy one just to publish weekly with different tips because of the questions get asked online. So really, Victoria, I would look at what type of podcast your show is, and then just sort of decide, does it make sense for me to break it into seasons, and then how are you going to work during the seasons? Are you going to create bonus content that gets automatically scheduled and released while you're taking that break between seasons, just to maybe give a recap of season 1, what to expect of season 2, that kind of stuff, just to keep your listeners engaged a little bit. So let's have a look. I think we got all the questions. I'm going to have look through the comments here. Using Ala2 for transcripts. Martin, I know that Boomcaster has it with Sparky. I could use it. I need to do the call to action for the support. Okay. And then Dan, is anyone else from Toronto catchment area? Dan, if you're not, I don't know if you're on Discord, mate. If you're on Discord, there's a Canadian podcast Discord, which I'm part of, that's run by Al Greco. And there's good 200, maybe 300 podcasters in there, all across different areas of Canada, but a lot of, Ontario, GTA podcasters. So if you're not on that, let me just see what the name of the Discord is, and I will see if I can drop that in the comments for you. There we go. So I'm going to drop this in the comments for you, Dan. I would recommend you. There you go. That's an awesome Discord. I didn't like Discord until I joined this group, because I was very wary of. I felt Discord was like very hard to navigate. It could be overwhelming, and I like very simple, clear UI and stuff. But this group is not super crazy active, and it's really cool for connecting with other Canadian podcasters. And like I said, they've got a few people actually down in the Toronto and GTA catchment area. So worth checking that out. But yeah, I'm going to wrap this up. It's lasted over an hour actually, so that's cool. Thanks for the questions. I really appreciate it, and thanks for popping along and joining me on this. Like I say, I may do this again. It's been okay. It's been fun. And Harry, I've got some questions for you. I think I might have pinged an email earlier actually, but I'll follow up anyway. Just some questions on the old the live stream. Like I say, I run 1 minute podcast tips. So if you want a simple, quick, easy podcast that helps you be a better podcaster in just a minute a week, 1minutepodcasttips.com is your place. You can find all the episodes over there, how to follow, etc. And I'd love to see you there. But again, thanks again for popping onto this. I really appreciate it. And whatever you have going on this Saturday, have a great weekend. And